Welcome to Timber Frame Design using SketchUp Part 5, Making Shop Drawings. Little disclaimer, before you can do the things we're going to do in this tutorial, you must have already downloaded the timber framing extensions from the extension warehouse, and you can learn how to do that in the first video in this series. So during this video, we will be using the paint bucket tool, the dimension tool, the text tool, and we will also be using a function called TF Make Shop Drawings. I would like to point out at this time that the pegs we drew in our previous tutorial are considered to be guidelines by SketchUp. So at that point, once you've drawn your pegs, you should not use the edit delete guides function, because it'll get rid of your guidelines, but it'll also get rid of your pegs and you'd have to redraw them. So in this tutorial, we're going to learn how to make shop drawings that make the most sense, that help us do our layout accurately. So we typically use square rule layout methods, where you pull your dimensions from a reference face during layout. So a reference face would typically be a top face in a rafter or a plate. It could be a bottom face in a sill, or oftentimes an outside face in a post. So you'll see in this model, I have painted those reference faces a bluish purple color. That will help me when I make my shop drawings. It'll give me some options that make it easier for me to avoid mistakes. So I need to show you how to paint these faces. So I'm going to go to the original model that has not been painted. I'm going to triple click the top plate. And then I'm going to click on the top face once, and you'll see now I've highlighted just that face. I'm going to go up to my paint bucket tool. It gives me lots of options. I'm just going to go with this color blue right here, and then I'm going to hover over that face and click once. Now I'm going to take my select tool and click, and now I'm going to do the same thing to a post. So 3 clicks, and then I click on the face I want. Grab that color and then click on it. Select to get out of there. Now the foot, the bottom is the reference face, so I'm going to paint the bottom. You'll see that it painted the bottom on both of those. For the tie beam, it is also the bottom. This is a little unusual because we've cut that curve there, so we have to click those 3 places. So we have successfully painted the reference faces on our timbers. So let's make a shop drawing. So I'm going to click on the top plate once, then I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go down my options to TF Make Shop Drawings. Now I cannot modify my shop drawings till I save it. So this is called top plate. I have created a series of folders where I have my different models, and then I have a specific folder for shop drawings. I'm going to open that, and I created a folder for the plate. I'm going to open that, and it says top plate, and I'm going to save. Now that I've done that, I can go into that folder. Now, one of the things I did ahead of time is I created all these other sub drawings, and you'll see what that means here in just a moment. So let's open the top plate, and you will see that it gives me a list of features in the upper left corner, and these are based on some of the things that we set as defaults when we were setting up our extensions, and that can be seen in the first video in the series. So here is the 4-side view. You'll notice that it starts up here it shows the bottom face. Now from the bottom face, the next one down is the north face. So this is an image of that timber rotated toward the top. And then now the top face is on what would appear to be the bottom. When we rotate that next, it brings the top face up here. When we rotate it again, it brings the south face up. So you have all 4 rotations. And up here is the information about this. So if I left click once and then I right click, I can edit that text. You'll see it already has my company name in. And then it has the project name, and that is taken from the name of the model that I saved it as. So there's some unnecessary things here, so I'm going to get rid of that. I'm just going to call it 30-inch horse. It'll also tell me that the top plate is a 4x6 timber and it's 6 feet long. It's not really 6 feet long. It's less than that, but the default in the settings is increments of 2 feet. And the shortest one that they would show there would be 6 feet, so we can ignore that. So I'm just going to reduce it down to that. And once I've made those changes, if I save, then anything I modify or any other versions of this that I make will already have that updated. So if you look at the overall thing, you will see that this shows the blue painted face, but you'll also see these curious little arrowheads. And those arrowheads would not be there if we hadn't painted our reference face. But by painting the reference face, it automatically puts an arrow that points to the edge that you would pull your measurements from. And this is going to become really important. So what I typically do is, instead of trying to do all my dimensions on one page, because then the lines start crossing each other and it's really hard to put all of it on there, I actually will save these as 4 separate files. One file for just the bottom face, one file for the north face, one file for the top face, and one file for the south face. So to do that, I could simply, if I wanted to start with the bottom face, I would click on this one and hit delete. Click on that and arrow and delete. Click on that, delete. Click on that, delete, that, delete. And then I'm using my roller mouse, or the wheel on my mouse to zoom in on that. So then I could come up here and I could call this, I could edit that and call that bottom face. And then save as. Now this is going to be really important. Not just save, because if I do save, it's going to copy this over top of the other one. And I'm going to go save as top plate, bottom face. And you can see that it's been saved there. So if I look in my folders, I have a file for the original with all 4 faces. I have a file for the bottom plate that I just created, and then ahead of time I had done the north face, the south face, and the top face. So let's go to we'll just pick one of these faces. Let's go to this one. So you can see this is the south face, and because this arrow is here, that means that edge is where I want to pull my measurements down. So we're going to use our dimension tool. I'm going to click in the corner once and then let up, and then move my mouse down and find that, click and let up, and I can drag this way. That tells me that's 6 inches in that dimension. I can do the same thing for the overall length, but notice I really need to get that little circle to tell me that I'm at the end. Now I typically tend to pull my dimensions from one end or the other, either from the right end and then work my way down, or from the left end and work my way right. It's really just a matter of preference. So I'm going to click here, click here, pull that down, click here, and pull that down. I'm going to click here and come over here. Now you may ask, why am I not just pulling each side from each end? And the reason is this allows me to be more accurate. When I'm pulling all my dimensions from a single point, I'm not compounding any of my errors. You could add other things in here. You could, if you just wanted to double check that this should be 1 foot 10 inches, for instance. One of the things that you'll learn is your particular style of layout will determine which measurements you want to pull. It's best to only include dimensions that you're actually going to use so that they don't kind of clutter up your drawing. Now you'll notice these little plus signs. Those are the points where your peg holes will be, and those were established when we created the pegs in our previous tutorial. So we need to get some dimensions on those. So I'm going to click on that once and let up. And then I'm going to click on, I can either grab the midpoint or I could grab the corner. And then as I move my mouse around, you'll see that that's 5.5 inches from there. I can do the same thing here. Let's go to the midpoint this time. And that one's 8.5 inches. And again, you've really got to learn what makes the most sense when you're putting your dimensions on. Now, because this is the reference face, when I measure these pegs, or when I put the dimension for the pegs, I want to bring it from this edge down, not from the bottom edge up, because this is my reference face. So I'm going to start over here in the corner. I'm going to click that once. I'm going to grab this and then put that there. Now I only put it there once because both pegs are on the same plane. You might wonder why I started at the corner rather than trying to grab the peg itself. Well, once you've already put a dimension on a peg, it's actually pretty hard to grab a hold of that peg. You almost have to really zoom in order to do it. So I just choose to come in from a corner or side. These are going to be the same, and we don't need to put little dimensions all the way across here. You could just transfer these numbers. You know, you could pull your measurements from this end on those. But we also need to define the depth of this housing, because this is set up to be a 1-inch housing. However, because of square rule layout, we're not going to go 1 inch from here and put that as our dimension. We want to pull our dimension from this edge again. So I'm going to come up here, click once, come here, click once, and then I'm going to set that. And that tells me that when I lay that out, I lay it out 5 inches from the top face because this is my reference face. This allows you to use an imperfect timber, which almost every timber is imperfect. This is supposed to be 6 inches, but it might be 5 7/8 on this end, and it might be 6 on this end, or it might be 6 1/16 on this end. But if you pull your dimensions from a reference face, then you know that the housings, regardless of how thick one end is versus the other, you know that the housings are going to be on the same plane, specifically 5 inches, well, not the same plane, but they're going to be specifically 5 inches down from the top edge. So this is the south face. I'm now going to go to View, Face Style, X-Ray, and then it'll show me my tenon as well. And I go here because it's kind of important for me to go back in and go, let's see, how deep is that tenon? So I'm going to use my tape measure tool, and I'm going to click here and click here. And it's a little off because I'm not quite grabbing on the corner. Let's try it over here. So you'll see that that's 5 inches. If I tried to do that as with the dimension tool, it'll show it here, but you'll notice it's a fainter number. And so that means that that dimension is actually laid out inside the timber, so you don't see it as well on your shop drawings. But if we put it here, then when we do our next shop drawing for the bottom face, we can actually put it in as text. So I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to pull up the bottom face, which I've already created and saved. So this is the bottom face. If I want to do my dimensions, I put my dimension tool, put that there, that's 4 inches. Click here, let up, click here, let up, that's 4 inches that way. Click here, click there, 10 inches. Again, I can go here to here, and then I can click for my overall length. Usually on my overall length, I drag it down to the opposite face just to get it out of the way. And now I need to know what the layout is for here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my text tool, which is this one right here. I'm going to come along here, and I'm just going to grab that midpoint, click once, and then slide off to the right, and then click again, and then I'm going to type 5 inch deep. Now I can't hit enter. That doesn't do what I want to do. So after I type it, I simply go up to the select tool and click it, and then it puts it there. So we've used the text tool to label how deep that mortise is going to be. Now we need to figure out these layouts. So I'm going to go back to my dimension tool, click here, and then drag it into the middle. This is a 1.5 inch tenon. If I tried to here, it vanishes because it's on a different plane. So I lay it out in the middle. And then I want to put one here and here, which is 1.25 inches. Now you have to be careful because sometimes it'll grab here and here and do a diagonal. And you'll see that it's 1 5/8. So always zoom in and make sure that you're grabbing what you want to grab. So those are going to be 1.25 inches. And then of course you could do the same down here, but we know those are both the same mortises, tenons, and housings because we made a copy of the post, which is what goes in there. So I would save this and I'd be good to go. So this is the end of the information on shop drawings. There are other things that I would like to point out with regard to the painting of our reference faces. Now I know, and this is because this will drive you crazy. So let's assume for a moment that this outside face of this post were a reference face. It's not, but I just want to show you a little quirk in the program. If I painted that face, you'll notice that it also painted this face. And I don't want this face painted. I want the outside face painted. Why did that do that? Well, that's because when I made this one, it was a copy of this that I just slid over. So since this is a copy, it does the exact same thing. So I'm going to edit, undo that. And I'll show you the way around that. It's this feature called Make Unique. So once I've copied something, if I want to keep it in my drawing but not make it connected to the original, I click on it once, and then I right click and I go up to a function called Make Unique. And once I've done that, now you'll see if I go back here and try to paint this face, it paints that face and only that face. Nothing was painted here. So now I can come in here and I can paint that outside face if I choose. Again, these are not true reference faces, but I wanted to show you that little quirk in the model because it'll drive you crazy if you didn't know what that was. So this concludes our fifth tutorial in the series. Hope you enjoyed it, and we hope to post more in the near future.